And what I'm doing now is placing down shadows which will act as the darkest parts of the grass that the sheep is standing in. I have just refreshed my brush, but even now, by rotating my brush and holding it at different angles and scumbling it across the page, I can get this huge variety of colours and marks and textures very, very quickly. And we'll come back to this region later on and put some highlights on it. But the next thing is to get back to the sheep itself. Next up, I've got some pure titanium white on my brush, and while the brush is heavily loaded, I'm going to apply the white to the regions where I want a good coverage. So that's either where the light is striking the sheep very, very strongly, or just regions like the legs, which are pretty much pure white in some areas at least. And the same is true for the head. But notice that I am still applying my brush, or rather I'm applying my paint using the brush in such a way that I'm describing the contours of the surface I'm painting, or I'm describing the way that the hair or the wool is falling over the surface, or simply to describe the shape. For example, the upper lip of the sheep there, and then the lower jaw there as well. And once again, because I've kept the paint fairly dilute, some of that blue that I put down before, and some of the yellow even from our colour beginning, some of that's going to show through. And it just makes for a much more multi-dimensional image than if we just started to try and get the correct colour immediately. Now, the left side of this part of the sheep is catching the light, so I'm just applying the white very thinly, but notice I'm keeping a ragged edge to simulate that sort of fluffiness that these animals have. So I've just reloaded my brush, and that's going to allow me to pick out the regions where light is catching the tops of the ears. And again, I'm deliberately doing this in a broken and textured fashion. I'm not simply painting a white line around the ears. And that's not to say that solid lines don't have their place in painting, but certainly, in my opinion at least, if you're painting wool or something which is living, there aren't too many straight lines, there aren't too many solid lines. The tone tends to vary, the colour tends to vary from place to place. Now, I haven't got much white left on the brush, but I'm going to apply it in the dry brush fashion. To start to create this feeling of wool. And again, trying to be as efficient as possible, as I had white on my brush, I've just added a little bit of the fluorescent red to give me a very light pink. And as you can see, I'm using that for the insides of the ears, but I need a much darker pink for the areas where the ears are in shadow, and also for the upper lips here and here. So I've just picked up some more of the fluorescent red and added some ultramarine blue to that mix. That's working quite well for the insides of the ears. And I'm going to put a little bit of that colour on the upper lips there. And now it's always a good idea to get the painting to develop everything at the same rate. So I've worked quite a lot on the sheep up until now. So I want to do some work on the grass and the ground here as well, so that the sheep is sort of occupying its environment, and that will allow me to make the final adjustments to colour and line in a more efficient way than if I sort of finish the sheep, then I paint in the ground, and then might have to go back to the sheep to change it again. So let's start working on the grass. So I'm going to need some bright greens and some, maybe some oranges and some yellows as well, to pick out all the different colours in the grass. But while I've got this pink on my brush, I'm actually going to put just a few little bursts of that colour in amongst the foliage as well. And in order to paint the grasses, I've got another flat brush with some fluorescent green, quite a good healthy dollop of cadmium yellow, and then just a touch of titanium white. And I'm going to use this to start to put in some grass over the top of the darker colours that we put in before. And once again, we'll get a mix of effects and colours by keeping the paint fairly thin and applying the brush in different ways. So in particular, what I'm keen to do is, you see this area of yellow under the belly of the sheep, I'm keen to convert that to a green by applying this thin layer of green over the top, because at the moment the sheep is rather disappearing against the background, and that's not something we want. Now let's add a little more white into the mix. And for now that will do. That area isn't finished yet.